Welcome to StellarCast, the Stellar Recruitment Podcast. Let's go on an inspiring journey by listening, learning, and taking key actions from our own recruitment experts, as well as industry leaders and inspirational individuals. By unlocking our own transformative change, we can all become the best versions of ourselves.
Hey guys, we're super lucky here to have Dan Hunt joining us here today. He is the co-founder of Mental Health Movement, which is a wonderful organisation helping organisations and individuals with mental health and mentally healthy workplaces. Beyond that, he started his career as a prop forward for the St George Dragons. So he shares in a really vulnerable, open fashion, has some really simple takeaways for you to learn from. We covered so much great stuff with Dan. We've split this into two installments. So this is the first installment. Enjoy it and be sure to tune in for the second installment also. Cheers. Well, look, guys, we're super lucky to have Dan Hunt here with us today, founder of the Mental Health Movement. Really looking forward to unpacking what the guys do and I guess Dan's journey within that, because I think it's fair to say huge need and requirement for organisations like Dan. So welcome, Dan. Really looking forward to having the chat. And I guess maybe the best way to sort of set the scene is to sort of quantify, I guess, part of the reality that we're sort of living through. And I think the Productivity Commission found mental health costs employers up to, somewhere in the vicinity of $40 billion, and lower participation, absenteeism, presenteeism, which is people showing up to work but unable to be productive. I'll be keen to understand through your experience, what's your view on this and what needs to change to address this phenomenon. I mean, obviously it's a dynamic, complex question, but I'll be keen to sort of understand your take on that from your experience.
Yeah, and look, as we know from obviously that commission and their findings, but absenteeism, presenteeism, mental ill health is the leading cause of those, and you look at the cost to the economy. But then you look at sort of work cover claims, that they're skyrocketing, in particular psychological claims. But then I guess the challenge here is, I remember when I first started work at work, before I made my NRL career, coming from an upbringing of domestic violence, where I had a lot of things I hadn't processed. And I was 17, 18 years old. And I remember I was doing 40 hours a week then. And I remember my boss said to me, "Don't bring your problems into work." And it's like, well, I spend most of my life here. Where else am I supposed to take them?
Yep.
And it's kind of, you're not John and Diane at home, John and Diane at work. You're John and Diane the whole person. So that's the thing, where if people are coming into a workplace where they don't feel supported, their leadership doesn't know how to start, hold, support, link in and around that. They haven't been provided sort of the support, the resources, the training, all those different elements that make a mentally healthy, supportive workplace. There's obviously going to be some challenges there. But the thing about it as well, it's not just the psychosocial hazards in the workplace. There's the contributing factors outside. So finances, pressures, upbringings, expectations, drugs and alcohol, illness, grief, loss, where these things are affecting us as a human being. And to think that that's not going to come into the workplace, well, that's ridiculous. Of course it is. And I draw back to my experience in the workplace that I did in professional sport. And you talk about presenteeism, where you're there in body, but your mind's somewhere else. So for me, I was there taking a kickoff in front of 45,000 people, and I was worrying about things from my past and my upbringing that I hadn't processed. How do you think those games in my performance and things like that? If I was on a piece of heavy machinery, like that's a workplace accident right there. So how do you obviously be able to better manage? It's not stop, but how do you better manage absenteeism, presenteeism? Look, there's no one answer, but from those findings from that commission, obviously it is elements to create, develop and maintain a mentally healthy, supportive workplace, which, look, it includes removing stigma, providing mental health literacy, building mental health resilience, improving leadership capability, improving help-seeking behaviours, providing access to support in different ways for what people need. Because you look at it at the moment, the EAP is kind of the mental health strategy at the moment. The EAP uptake sits between 4 and 11% in the Australian workplace. But everyone has a mental health. So whatever's happening at the moment isn't quite there. But I look back when I was diagnosed in 2010 of November to where we are now. We've got to look at, well, we have come a long way. We're doing a podcast now. There's an ISO standard 45003 being released. You're doing some great work promoting all of that. So there's a lot of positives in this space as well. So I'm big on identifying the change, the challenge, the adversity, the problem, but it's what can we use with literature, research, clinical validation, anecdotal evidence to build what's the solution look like? What's the blueprint look like? What's the strategy or the framework look like? And then it's, well, how do we do that? And there is best practice, but every workplace is different and every person within that workplace is different. So it's also about assessing the individual workplace to then align or match up with the standards of what is best practice as well. But yeah, there are definitely things that we're seeing in the workplace from the frontline work, in particular around safety, for example. I've sat in tens of thousands of toolbox talks where they'll be talking about sort of an incident or some their sort of injuries and elements like that, and it comes back to lack of focus, lack of concentration, fatigue. They're all directly related to the way you think, act and feel, which is your mental health. So if we can better manage those things, you're going to reduce, well, in that sense, the safety incidents, your total recordable injuries. And if you're thinking better, feeling better, and you're being better, you're going to want to come into work.
Yeah, so huge upside, and I'm sort of keen to understand some of the stuff you're doing with organisations. You've helped many organisations and individuals within that. So we'll talk about that in a minute, but I mean, it's particularly relevant that we're talking about this during Movember, and as you can probably see, I've got a very dodgy moustache there. If you look really closely, you can see that.
I did notice the caterpillar on the top lip. I didn't want to say anything, but no, I absolutely love it.
So it's a good cause, as you know, but so it's relevant that we record it during this month, but you'd be far more informed in the detail than what I am, but, you know, from what I see here and read, you know, we're living in a time where drug and alcohol abuse and the wider mental health or ill mental health, you know, it all appears to be going in the wrong direction. You know, I'd be sort of keen to understand from your point of view, is drug and alcohol abuse just escapism from the reality that some people are living in? And how do we change the current trajectory of suicide rates, which is still huge and really alarming? And I guess within that, there's still, you know, a reluctance of people seeking help. So what's your sort of take on all of that?
Yeah, look, I think there's elements anecdotally which I'll share through my own challenges with substance, as well as studying in the space, and then obviously linking people to support in the space as well. But in and around that suicide management piece, it's obviously like, what are we sitting at? 9 Australians take their own life every single day. 76% of those are men. So 7 men are taking their own life every single day. And drugs and alcohol and substance is a risk factor. It does increase the risk of suicide. But when you have substance use, which is obviously a mental health disorder, but it could be coexisting, or there's that comorbidity with an anxiety disorder, a bipolar disorder, depressive disorders. So to say, yeah, look, is it escapism? Is it a coping strategy? Yeah, definitely. And is it a positive coping strategy? Well, no, it's not. And what defines a substance use disorder? Well, it's when it starts to affect, like, the law, when it starts to affect your health, when it starts to affect your work, and when it starts to affect your relationships, and you can't cut back, that's when it can potentially be a substance use disorder. So how many people, they say 5% of the Australian population are currently living with a substance use disorder? Well, is that accurate, or is you look at COVID and what it brought in terms of the percentage of the population that are now drinking more, and then a higher percentage of that to deal with the added stress, uncertainty and anxiety of what restrictions, lockdowns and everything that brought. So as a population, like, I grew up in substance use and issues there. I come into a professional environment where it was kind of train hard, play hard, drink hard. And then you look at Australian culture, and look, it's not everyone. Well, I know I am generalising, but when things go well, we'll have a drink. When things don't go so well, we kind of have a drink as well. And I'm not saying don't have a drink, but for me and my journey, when I hit rock bottom in 2010 through an injury and missing the grand final, and all the things that I'd swept under the carpet for 23 years from my upbringing come back and hit me like a ton of bricks, that's how I was conditioned, kind of anger, isolation, and I seen a lot of that growing up with that self-medication. I did turn to drugs and alcohol, anger, isolation. it was to numb the pain I was in. It was to escape reality, as you said. But when I did go to a mental health clinic and spent time in a rehab program, it wasn't so much the substance I was using. It was the reasons behind why I was using it. And then that was part of the journey, working with the clinical professionals, working with cognitive behavioural therapy, all these schema therapy, these different treatments that I'd went through. It was about processing and changing my relationship with the trauma, the grief, the things I went through growing up. And when I was able to manage, process those elements, I was able to better manage the substance use, but I was able to better manage my mental illness in type 2 bipolar disorder and find those coping strategies, the support networks, the self-care, the mindsets, all the different elements that make up looking after your mental health, but also better managing your mental illness. And that's obviously been a journey over the last 11 years. So the thing about it is, it's a really, and you'll probably already know this, there's no answer to this question. There is some light around it in terms of people will self-medicate. And it's not just with drugs and alcohol. It could be so many different things. And when it starts to affect those elements I spoke about and you can't cut back, it can sometimes amplify situations. And you look at it in and around suicide, people that take their own life are not in the right headspace. There's so many reasons why people do get to that point, but it's not necessarily that they want to die or they don't want to be here or they want to hurt their loved ones or family members. It's that they're in that much pain that they want it to end. And sometimes self-medication with substance can numb that pain, but the pain's still going to be there once that substance wears off. And I've learned that both through my studies, but also through lived experience and life experience. And I guess the key there is if you are someone listening that is worried about that or it potentially is becoming an issue, or if you are having any suicidal thoughts, like I want you to know that it's okay, but it's also okay to seek that support. Don't keep it a secret. Don't keep suicide a secret. Don't think you have to do it on your own or you've got to DIY it and Bunnings it. That's what I tried to do. And when I realised it was okay to seek support, it just draws a line in the sand and it opens up the world of opportunity, but it starts you on your mental health journey to not stop struggle, but to better manage it, better support it. And there's other ways than substance. I know that more than anyone.